Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Hello there. Okay, I said I'd get to it. Dungeonborn by Dakota Krout. Okay, now this book, when I first went through it, it confused me because it fell under the lit RPG genre. It fell under the part where people are playing video games. It fell under that. And honestly, now that I've actually gone through his entire series, I feel like he didn't know exactly what he was doing, but he just enjoyed writing, and that's good enough for itself. Because I enjoyed the characters. It starts out with basically the life of a dungeon. How a dungeon is formed, how it comes to be, how you get loot from dungeons. It's basically the dungeon's perspective, and I absolutely enjoy that. I absolutely enjoyed it because it felt like, okay, now we're getting a different perspective. It's the dungeon who's alive, and the people who raid it aren't so much. But the thing that threw me off, I was like, wait a minute, aren't there supposed to be video game characters? Aren't there supposed to be people playing? I thought Dale, who was another main character, was an NPC who basically started gaining power, and then it seemed, it threw me off because it was like, these people are legit, this is just a fantasy. It's legit just a fantasy, which is good, which is amazing in and of itself, but it was like, why does it fall under this genre? What is going on here? Is it just the fact that it's a dungeon that it has sentience? But all dungeons apparently have sentience, but going off this story. And it threw me. But I love the characters enough to where it kept me continuing. Because here, Dungeonborn is just about Cal, who's the dungeon. It's the name of the dungeon. He ends up being partnered with Danny. And honestly, it was their relationship together, which was absolutely what I found amazing, because it was hilarious. It was like, okay, this is a legit relationship here. The way he would zone off and work on his own thing. I could relate to the character, because I could relate to Cal, because when you're fixed on one thing, it's easier to close off everything else. And then he would realize halfway through working on something that Danny had been yelling at him. And I absolutely loved that. I found it hilarious because it was like getting so focused on one thing that you zone everything else out. That made sense to me. I could relate to the character. And Dale was a fun character as well, who basically always tried to do the best, basically the same as Cal. I absolutely enjoyed the characters in it. I loved the stories, the into it stories. I love the in-depth stories. I loved Hans, and it seemed like there was one goal for this story. One goal. It was basically for the dungeon to create a Dungeonborn. That's it. Because one thing you realize from reading Dakota Krout is he absolutely loves throwing the name of the book in the book at the very end. He loves doing that, absolutely. Normally in puns, like in when he did the Completionist Chronicles, but in this one it's basically just mentioned. I found that fine. It lets you know that he's reached the end of his book. And then they introduce the real big bad guy at the very end. And they introduce that he's the reason that Cal came into an existence. And I find that fascinating. I found the story absolutely fascinating. Of course, he reneged on a few promises, but I still found it okay for the most part. But I absolutely love this story, how it starts out. It just seems wholesome for the most part. Dale as a character is really relatable because he doesn't really have much experience in life. He's just a simple mountain boy. He's that cliche farm boy from any hero novel. And Cal's just someone who's interested in growing and pursuing knowledge. I absolutely love Cal as a character, even though he's a dungeon. It's fun to see both sides, both the ones raiding, which is Cal and his group, or Dale and his group, raiding the dungeon, and Cal as he's trying to kill them. It's fun to see both perspectives and how they both rationalize their existence. Yeah, I just found it interesting, absolutely interesting, that I found it fascinating, because the perspective itself. No other lit RPG, I'm just going to call it that, falls under that category. Does something like that. Well, maybe I will read this one later and review it, but I really do like it. I really do like it. Thank you all for watching. Talk to you next time. Doodles!